Morning, everyone. It's midday. Let's start. I'd like to acknowledge that we all meet on the lands of First Nations people and pay my respects particularly to the elders of the Kaurna land on which I'm sitting. And we'd be grateful if you would introduce yourself in the chat column and say whose country you're on today. We've only got 30 minutes, so we'll do it at speed. We're live streaming and the session will be recorded, so you can see it all again in about an hour. If you're not talking, keep your mic muted and then remember to unmute yourself when you want to speak. You can use the chat for questions, or you can just say in chat, I want to ask a question, and we'll let you into the conversation. There's a live captioning today. I'd like to thank these people in advance because it gets a bit busy at the end. Melissa, Lachlan and Manna, thanks for your attention and work across the days. Auslan, Susan, are you here? Yep, Susan's in from Auslan. So if you click and pin her if you want that support. Thanks, Susan. We know you're having a terribly busy time, and we're really glad to have you. So today we're just going to get an update from the Australia Council, talk about how the resilience fund's going. We know some of you have already had knockbacks, so there's a bit of pain being experienced, so we need to talk through that and what might happen next. Frank Panucci, who's got about 3 weeks left in his job. Welcome for one of the last. We might have to have you again, Frank, before you go. But this is, we're really grateful that you've come on again. And I'm hoping you've got with you Alice Nash. Is Alice online? Can we see her yet? Anyway, Alice will be on and coming in, and we're going to give Frank the opportunity to introduce her, since she's replacing him, and building relationships with Alice and between Alice and our community will be very important in the future. So that's what we're going to do. We've got half an hour, so let's get right into it. So again, welcome, Frank. You've been generous in coming on when we've asked you, so even though they're not sometimes the most comfortable conversations, and we're grateful for that, that you're facing up and dealing with it. So could you talk to us about what things are up to, what's happening with the Resilience Fund, and more importantly, where you think the Australia Council's going in the future? So give us a bit of context and today update.
Sure. So I acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the land in which I was born and still reside, and I thank them every day for looking after the land and looking after me. And I acknowledge their ancestors, past, present and future. So quickly about the Resilience Fund. So I think all of you would be aware, and it was in the invite to today's session, that the last applications to the Resilience Fund will be on the 28th of May. That's obviously got a lot to do both around where we think we're at in the cycle of this first phase of this sort of quick response process. Plus it gives us opportunity, much more administratively about getting funds out the door by 30 June, which is always crucial for us. And we intend, most probably second half of June, to come out and talk with an announcement about what our funding post mid-June, sort of July, August, September, October, November looks like from the Australia Council. Our view currently is that we just need to make sure that what we put out there to support artists and arts organisations is the best instrument we can have to support people in the context of what the world looks like, which is obviously constantly changing. So with changing of, the government changes to restrictions on movement and other things, what is the next iteration for arts and arts organisations to be able to, and artists to be able to I suppose, map out what at least their immediate future looks like. In a sense, we keep talking about we're just trying to chunk periods of time because we think that's the best we can do at this point, to be honest. But just to go back to the Resilience Fund, so since we opened the Resilience Fund up, to date we've received just over 1,900 applications. We've funded just over 510, 515, something like that, to be precise. In terms of money that we've paid out, to artists and arts organisations through the fund to date, it's just over 2,150,000, which is about 26% success, just over 26% success rate in terms of the applications received and the requests received. Obviously, the vast majority of those applications that have been approved and the ones that we've received the most of have been to the Survive stream, which is the one which was basically trying to ensure that individual artists were receiving immediate response and organisations just to get them over, I suppose, the immediate crisis of everything being shut down and work just evaporating and opportunities evaporating quite quickly for people. The Adapt and the Create streams are picking up now in demand. The Adapt stream is a bit slow to start with, and I think all of us, both ourselves, but I think people out in the sector were getting their heads around what would be possible and what that might look like, and that's starting to pick up as well. So I think we'll see a shift between now and the next couple of weeks of applications moving more towards the Create and the Adapt. In place where a number of people rotate through assessments, and then another iteration where someone overviews those decisions and then they come to an executive director to make the final approval, just to ensure that there's consistency and that we do keep abreast of issues which are more reflective around our commitment to diversity as well. But that's where we're at with the Resilience Program. So I suppose in terms of what the future holds, we just have to wait till the middle of June. And the date of the second half of June is it's also because, we have to take whatever changes we may want to make in providing support to the arts sector going forward goes to our board, and that meets in the sort of, first half of June. So it just gives us a chance. So we're busily working away on that as we speak. The only other thing I'd like to really mention is we will be updating our COVID advice document up on our website, which is basically an attempt to assist in understanding all the whole of economy structures and packages that the government's put out there. And we do keep raising and we keep providing advice around some of the specific issues confronting areas of the sector in terms of some of those whole of economy approaches that have taken place, and in particular, we around JobKeeper and the specific complications around what casualisation means in our sector, which is completely different to a whole range of other sectors, but unfortunately quite common also in a range of the hospitality and sector as well. But to date, it is what it is at that point. I think that, pretty much that's where I'll leave it for now. So I'll give people a lot more chance to ask questions and stuff because the time we've got is not too long.
Frank, let me just ask you the first question. Given the applications that are coming in and the things that you've seen, are there common errors that people are making in their application that are making them less successful? What sort of advice would we give to people who are applying to the fund to improve their chances of success?
Well, there's a couple of things, Anne. Firstly, in terms of the profile of people that have applied, over 65% of the people who've put in applications, in particular to the Survive stream, are people who have never applied to the Australia Council before. We've actually had no contact with. So there, I suppose, and some of them come from areas which traditionally have not been supported through the Australia Council. So I think in all cases, we still are providing phone advice to people before they submit their applications, even for resilience. So I think my first point of advice is pick up the phone, and get advice. I think in the ADAPT one in particular, unless on the CREATE, I think people need to be clear about what the adaptation actually means in terms of positioning them in this moment in time. So is it about adapting the way you make work, create work, connect with your communities, engage with your communities, or actually about the way you, I suppose, your own business models to a large extent? And I think they're the kind of things to focus on in a way. The CREATE one tends to be pretty, how can I say it, more our normal, both ours and I think applicants' normal space of operation, which is making work and working, and I suppose setting up work for the future. The majority in the Survive, the big issues around Survive is then clearly articulating what the urgency is and what it is that has stopped, that's created the crisis, in the sense that you need emergency relief, because fundamentally it's emergency relief. But
the numbers are a little bit scary, aren't they? Like, you've got 1,400 people who've applied who haven't been funded, and spent nearly half the fund.
2,158,000. Well, because what happens in ADAPT and CREATE, organisations apply as well. So so it goes across. But when we did our modelling, and we sort of roughly worked out what we thought the model would look like across the 3 different streams. Survivors started to taper off, and so ADAPT and CREATE are the ones that are picking up. So I think even over time, what we'll see by the end is that, how can I put this? The actual number of applications and successes won't increase at the pace they have to date, because Survive's been the one with the big demand. So our capacity to fund was always estimated. We always thought we'd get to about 25%, and that's what we were running at, to be honest. That was when we sat down to try and work it out. We just knew that by the end, we'll most probably be able to invest about 5.6, 5.8 million into the program rather than 5. So we've been, I think the technical accounting terms, we've been hoovering money up as much as we can from other parts of council and trying to get it into the program.
Okay, well, which is encouraging, because we always knew there wasn't going to be enough money in there, and it's a question about how to get more in. So what you're doing. Alice is on the conference. Frank, could you just introduce her and welcome Alice, and love to give you an opportunity just to comment.
So I get this beautiful task. To everyone who's in on this meeting, Alice Nash is taking over a new role at the Australia Council called Executive Director of Arts Investment. And for those who know the Australia Council to a certain extent, there used to be a division of grants and engagement, which I was Executive Director of, and another division called Major Performing Arts and National Engagement, which my ex-colleague Lisa Toomey used to be the Executive Director of. Those 2 divisions have been amalgamated into a division called the Arts Investment, and Alice Nash is taken over that new role and is quickly paddling fast as she can to get her head across it all. Alice comes with a long experience in back-to-back, and I'll get her to talk about that. I've known Alice for a long time, and I'm pretty, I have to say, pleased that she's the person who's taken over the role, and I think that all of the mob out there listening to us now and watching us now will be able to develop a great relationship with Alice, and I'm sure she's keen to do that as well. But and the other important thing about Alice that makes me even more chuffed, she's a very accomplished midfielder in that beautiful game called football, and some of you know as soccer. So I'm passing on. Dear Alice will now speak for herself.
Welcome, Alice.
Hi, Anne, and thanks, Frank. And yes, it's true. I played from 5 till I was 42. And then my body said that's enough. But for those of you who don't know me, first of all, it's an honor to be here and to meet you all. I am familiar with, obviously, your work in certain areas. But for those of you who don't know me, I was the long-standing co-CEO and executive producer of Back to Back Theatre in Geelong. And for those of you who don't know Back to Back Theatre, it's an ensemble theatre company of actors who have intellectual disabilities that ran education programs, community programs, had a pretty good national profile as well as a very robust international profile. And I guess I say that merely because I come from, when I started at Back to Back, to give you a sense, I started 20 years ago, and I worked a day and a half a week running that little company. And it grew to be something more substantial and came from an unlikely position of strength, or a potentially unlikely position of strength. And I loved that about Back to Back. I think it was someone from this sector who said to me once, "Who would have thunk it?" a little disability theatre company from Geelong could become one of Australia's best-known cultural exporters. So I say that merely because I like that strength comes from seemingly unlikely places, and I fully believed that that Back to Back had a really, really important contribution to make to local, national, and international dialogue. So I guess in that sense, I'm very aligned with the work of this group, because I just do not believe that work of import comes from the most obvious places.
So, Alice, most of the people who are involved in Little Lunch are people whose art is firmly connected to and grounded in their community. And a lot of them are people who work with young people.
Yeah.
And there's some concern that the Australia Council funding programs don't seem to have a strategic sense about art and young people and art and community practice. And so I'm wondering if you've got a view about where that strategic direction's going, not who you're going to fund, but really what's the frame in which this practice with young people and community and disability organisations and non-English speaking organisations. I mean, we understand that the First Nations programs are in pretty good shape, but the rest look wobbly.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of the rationale around Frank's work and Lisa's work being amalgamated into my role was to actually make sure that the person who's looking at wholesale investment, direct investment by council in this sector was consolidated. So my remit is to make sure we try to look after as best we can under very, as you well know too well, confined circumstances, a broad cross-section of our community, from the remote to from the small, from the young to the old, from the big end of town, and so on. And a case in point, I'm painfully aware of in the recent 4-year funding announcements and the previous cycle before that of how the outcomes have not been great for the youth performing arts sector. All I can do is say to you that at this point, I make a commitment to investigate these various areas of blindness that I, already in my meetings with state jurisdictions have been saying, okay, there's that big organization, but what about this group of small organizations that might or might not be funded by the Australia Council? How are we ensuring that investment in independent arts practice and the small actually get support in this time of crisis and well beyond? So it's a commitment. It will be slow change. It's a very, very hard change, but it's why I took an interest in the job. And that is because I believe that it's incredibly important, all the work, the full scope of the work. And just the other day, I'm busy. I'm so lucky I've still got Frank for a few more weeks, and I'm busy mining his information. And I said, we need to do a sectoral scan next year. What should we do? We're committed to doing some kind of sectoral scan. So one of those might be youth arts or the like. So I'm asking those questions. This is my third week in the job. So I'm just mainly trying to collect information, make some decisions at speed. I'm the one who had to decide to close the Resilience Fund, to make sure we didn't run out of money. I'm the one who's also with Frank, we're trying to hoover up, to use that technical word, as much money as we can for that fund. I'm really keen to hear and listen and pay attention. It's, as we well know, not easy for anyone.
Thanks, Alice.
Is that helpful?
It's terrific for people to start to hear, what you're interested in and where you're coming from, and I find it reassuring that at least you're paying attention to those issues. So I've got a couple of people. We've only got 8 minutes left, team. So Busty, are you on? And do you have a question for Alice? Where are you, Busty? Yeah.
Yes. I was just wondering, so with sort of the closure of the resilience grant, what are the steps? Because I would say you would be in some sort of planning mode at the moment at the Australia Council. Like, what are the other steps that are going to actually engage the community with funding? Because we're still sort of in the middle of this crisis. It's still happening. Even by the 28th of May, it's still going to be there.
Sure. Yeah. I might just jump in, and then Alice can jump in if she wants to as well. So we are obviously already trying to plan what we think the next iteration of support looks like.
Mm-hmm.
We'll make an announcement in the second half of June of what those new support programs might look like. And because we also need to be able to make an assessment of what the lifting of regulations might mean, and if there's other packages that might come from both at state and Commonwealth level. Mm-hmm. And we also understand that there is a pressure building within, the sector, the arts sector generally, about sort of, I suppose, more significant project funding. So we'll be making an announcement about what that might look like as well in the next, I suppose, the end of this calendar year at this point. But like I said earlier, we're just trying to chunk things, and this has been some of the great guidance, to be honest, that Alice has, in the way that she's looked at things, said we just need to keep chunking things because things are changing so fast that the idea that we'd be able to come out in June and sort of say, okay, for the next 3 years, this is what it looks like, what our investment looks like, actually doesn't make a lot of sense, because, between now and, 3 months' time, things will change, and then it'll change again, and hopefully, we're not confronted, but if things were pear-shaped again and everything went back into lockdown, then we'd have to readapt things again. So all those things are deep in our thinking and planning, to be honest with Busty. So, I hope that sort of goes some way to sort of answer what you're asking.
Yeah, it just feels like at the moment, I suppose it's just coming to the forefront. Like, we feel like we're in this, for artists, and talk for myself and my crew, we're just in this constant loop of like going, oh my gosh, we're going to go for funding. Oh my gosh, we didn't get that funding. Okay, we're going to go again for that funding. And it's getting really quite like, it's tiring. It was tiring before this, but like, you know, but it's just, I don't know, there's like this need for this deep structural change, and how do we do that in this short amount of time? We can't. It needs to take a while.
Yeah.
I've got a question from Emma. Can I move on, Busty?
Yeah, fine.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you, Frank and Alice. I guess I'm just wondering, just following on from what you just said, Frank, about things constantly changing and needing to kind of keep up, be flexible in that change. Yeah. I'm wondering what that means for the new framework that's in development for the major performing arts organisations. Is that completely changing and shifting in the context of COVID-19 and the funding available to the Australia Council? And what's the timeline for that, and has it changed? And I guess just you've kind of answered it already, but I guess while people, and I kind of echoing what Busty said, you know, while there's this kind of need for flexibility and things are keeping on changing, there is really a need for small organisations to be able to plan ahead into so the sort of annual programming grants for in the June round are really critical. You know, I think a lot of people would be also matching them up with state funding applications and so on. And so I guess the Australia Council to offer those grants again, but also to think about what other annual program type initiatives might come back into the mix in the future. Like I think about things like the program presenter thing that the theatre section used to run, for instance, because I just feel like there's an increasing gap. Obviously, there's a massive gap between 60% of your budget going to the, you know, the majors and then the rest of the sector. But there's also a gap between the 4-year funded organisations and smaller organisations, those smaller organisations and individuals, and all of those gaps continue to widen. And so how OSCO can have more flexible initiatives, I guess, to try to kind of at least massage that a little bit.
I'll answer the second part of your question, then I'll leave Alice to answer the first part.
Got 3 minutes, Frank.
Yeah, quickly. All those things are deep in our thoughts, Emma, from now about what we offer in terms of being able to allow organisations to apply for support from what, you know, might be considered an annual program of activities. So that will be one of the elements of what I assume we will be announcing. Sorry, the Australia Council announce in the second half of June, because I won't be here anymore then. So I'll keep referring to them and not me anymore. But yeah, all those things are deep in our thoughts, and we're totally aware of them. And so, and how we structure budgets and programs to address a lot of those longer term issues, I think, is something that, you know, Alice is more than aware of and across. And I'll leave the National Performing Arts Partnership Framework to Alice.
Emma, just so I know, where are you from?
Vital Statistics in South Australia.
Hi. I just found out you can retitle your name on these things, which is quite helpful. Anyway, well, I found it useful to just know where people are from. We will announce in the second half of the year what we will do for the second half of this year. I'm loath to go further for reasons that Frank explained. My hunch is at the moment we'll continue with some incarnation of resilience, but we're consulting at speed as best we can and as widely as we can at speed to work out what might be needed for a short period of time. But then we are very likely, this is my hunch at present, but again, we'll work it out in the next few weeks to open some kind of open grants program. And I'm inclined to make that as flexible as possible, because I think that you on the ground probably know more than us what you need at the moment. So we'll be balancing that about how to make a wide range of flexible grants assess, you know, effectively and fairly assessed. That's my hunch. And and we will announce at end of June. On the framework, some of you might know that I was a co-founder and the deputy chair of Theatre Network Australia. So on that board for 9 years. And the work I did there, as well as work I did in advocating for disability arts, both to the NDIA and to the federal government, and I did that quite independently of my work for Back to Back Theatre, were about the need for structural reform in the federal investment in the arts. The framework itself was very, very long negotiated change, a very needed change. I think some will definitely feel that it doesn't go far enough. My personal view is that it is change. Whether that change will move quickly enough through this industry is remains to be seen. But I think we had to change it, at least, and it was a very difficult thing to get changed because it required agreement from all state arts ministers. But I think it's fantastic that it's in place because it opens the door for longer term structural change to the investment portfolio across jurisdictions.
So Alice, I'm sorry to tell you this, but we're out of time. In fact, I've let us run over because I thought it was important that people hear what you had to say. What this indicates, though, is that we need a longer conversation on this topic, and maybe we'll have the opportunity to invite you back. People do want to talk about structural change. You obviously have shepherded some through, but I think there's more discussion to go on.
I'll just say on the particular point, Emma, of whether it will change. Certainly there will be aspects of that partnership that will be changing in light of COVID-19, but those also have to be negotiated and are in negotiation right now.
Thanks, Alice, and thanks very much for coming today. Frank, I'm hoping we'll have you again. Thanks to Norman, Sarah and Elliot, without whom none of us would be the people that we are. To the captioners and Auslan, Susan, thanks everyone for coming. Sorry we have to close down. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you for inviting me. Bye.
Bye all.
Sorry for going over, Elliot.